So when COVID hit last year and everything got locked down, some churches could actually still reach their people, but many churches couldn't. Today we're going to review one of the most important lessons I hope every church has now learned. Hey there, it's Matthew Warner, and this is the Finding Uno Show. Welcome to the Finding Uno Show. Who's Uno? Oh, you know Uno. He's that one lost sheep the shepherd leaves the 99 to go after, and we are here to help you find him. I'm your host, Matthew Warner, joined by my co-host, Matthew Sewell. Hey, Matt.
Hey, what's going on? Good to be with you.
Not too much. So today we're going to follow up on our last episode a little bit and expand a little bit more because I think it's on everyone's mind right now, and of course we just went through it over this last year, but the best ways to reach our flock during a lockdown when all of a sudden you can't reach people. So the normal ways anyways. So the printed bulletin only works if people are showing up. And of course, only a small percentage of parishioners were probably reading it regularly anyways. Social media and the sort of dedicated mobile apps and all that, even though you're like, this is digital, this is great, they actually end up falling really dramatically short as well because a majority of our members aren't going there. So again, I think a lot of churches saw people flock to social media, quickly right after. It was the only way they could find their church or get the message. But we're seeing that sort of trend back to it's really just your most engaged people are going to engage you on social media. They're going to download your app. They're going to do all those kinds of things. So again, those channels reach what we call the 7%. If you don't know what that means, go back and watch our last episode where we explore the 7% and the 82%. But that's about it. And so a lot of, again, after the first few weeks, during the first few weeks, you had a lot of members that were probably more willing to go out of their way to get in touch with you, to go to your website, see what's going on. But that's all kind of died down now, and now we're back to this weird purgatory where we've tried to come back a little bit. We still have lots of restrictions. It depends on where you live, of course. But we're realizing that there's huge portions of our members, again, this is mostly the 82%, are not responding. They're not coming back. And so what are the best ways, and I hope this lesson was learned throughout the lockdown by all churches, but what are the best ways to reach people when it really counts, when we really need to, when not just when a crisis hits, that's important, not just when there's bad weather and a schedule change last minute, those are all really important too, and those all apply here, but also like now, when you're trying to reach people and they can't show up, or they're not showing up, or they've gotten very disengaged and they're not going out of their way to try to re-engage in your community.
Yeah, I mean, it's been super remarkable. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's made our job a lot easier because, for 10 years, Flocknote's been making basically the same case that the bulletin doesn't cut it, social media doesn't cut it, because one, the bulletin is just a sheet of paper. A lot of times it's not done well. It has a 0% open rate if people don't show up. And then social media, we're seeing the same thing even more now. Not only are people leaving in droves now, but already it was, there was a middleman. There was a Mark Zuckerberg throttling how much traffic you could see without spending money on advertising. But yeah, I think it's really remarkable how when people weren't able to sit in front of them, so many churches were like, well, shoot, how do I get a message to them now? And so, I mean, praise God. I mean, that people were able to find out that way that it was email and text, but still, for some reason, that's the case where it's just not kind of clicking. But yeah, I agree. We have to be smart, right, as church.
Well, I think it was something that churches couldn't ignore anymore once everyone was at home, because you could pre-COVID. You could send out your same communications. You get some responses. Again, it's usually that same group of most engaged people, but you can kind of pretend that it's all working because you still had a lot of people showing up on Sundays. It was normal. It was business as usual. And it's a slow shift, but of course there's 6 leaving the church for every one that's joining in general. And this is a mass cultural shift that the United States and the world is going through. And so we don't always see the big shift because it's kind of slow normally. And so we can do our normal communications. We can put stuff in the bulletin. We can put it on the website. We can post it on a social media page. We can whatever. And life keeps going, and we're okay. And it works for some things, and it works, not so well for a lot of other things, but it keeps going, and it's just normal. But when all this hit and now everyone's at home and we're like, wait, we need you guys, you can start coming back now, or hey, we need you to help support us, or hey, let's engage each other in a new way because we can't meet together in person right now for whatever reason. And you all of a sudden realize that there's hardly anybody responding back, that a majority of your community is not that engaged. And it was something we kind of sensed for a while, but that it wasn't, we couldn't ignore it anymore whenever all these lockdowns hit. And so, like Matt said, we've had incredible. I mean, Flocknote has been a unique place to view all of this from, because we've been offering this solution and trying to teach churches this over time. And many have learned this lesson, and they were the ones that when COVID hit, like, they were ready. They could reach their people directly. They could reach them without a middleman. They could reach the people who are not going to go out of their way to come get information and talk to them, because they had learned how effective email and text messaging is. But this just sort of really highlighted, I think, a lot of the things we've been hoping to teach churches for a long time. And so we hope now that it is a lesson that everybody can kind of grasp on to and go, okay, yeah, we weren't really that prepared. And I mean, we saw this because like the 2 months after COVID hit, Flocknote grew as much in those 2 months as we grew in our whole first 5 years we existed. And it was just, it was incredible, but it was because we were able to help people directly reach their members when they needed to. And so you already brought up a couple of these points, Matt, but I just want to highlight them real quick, because when it comes to why there's lots of reasons these channels work really well and they're ideal, but they should be the backbone of a church's communication structure for a couple of reasons. So one is they're direct. They directly reach the people. It pushes to a person where they're already, getting most of their direct push information, which is in their text inbox or their email inbox. Now, they do consume a lot on social media and other places like that, but the problem is the second point is that email and texting are independent. They're platform independent. So like you said, Matt, on Facebook now, you can get all these people to like you on your Facebook page, but you can only reach a very small percentage of them without paying for it often, because they've basically made it harder for it to show up in someone's feed unless you happen to be paying them money for it. We've seen additional things come in, of course, with all of the censorship and other issues lately. Whether it's justified or not in certain situations, certainly it is sometimes, but there are definitely a lot of these big tech companies and app stores and whatever that would consider, basic church teaching hate speech, something that is not allowed. And so when these kind of things happen, when there is risk of those kind of things happening, you need to be able to reach your people directly. And if you have an email address and you have a cell phone number, you can take that information and use it in so many different platforms to be able to reach those people directly when you need to. So not only do they reach more people than any other channels will, but they have this kind of independence to them that is a very reliable backbone for your church to depend on. It's something everybody can use and participate in. And then what you need, of course, is something simple to be able to help all your ministry leaders use those channels and organize all those contacts and keep them segmented like they're supposed to be segmented. And that's what Flocknote is, but you could use other tools as well. But the point here is email and texting should be, if they're not already after all this, we need to start now. That needs to be the primary way that we build our communication channels at any church community.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's super interesting to think back on the stories that we heard. I mean, gosh, I was just talking to the pastor of my own church yesterday, I think. And he said at one point, I mean, they're on Flocknote obviously, but he said, gosh, having Flocknote has been saving us right this year. But I mean, it's not rocket science. It's an email. It's a text message that is just like, hey, I remember it was really great. The two priests at our parish, had a video where they started out holding a tape measure showing that they're 6 feet apart, and then went on to talk for a few minutes talking about, just updating. Here's how much we have in the checking account. Here's where we're at. We're not going to have to lay off staff, blah, blah, blah. But it was conveyed to everybody in a way, like you said, that they already were there. So it's making life easier. I mean, a lot of it can still be kind of foreign. Surprisingly, we still hear of people of church staff saying, "Well, why would I send a text message? Why would I send in a text message to my church or something?" Right? And so it's just not a frame of reference. But once you kind of get into it a little bit, there's so many good practical usages of it, and you don't have to figure out how to game the system with all of these algorithms, or figure out how am I going to get the bulletin into the hands of people when they can't come to our church. Those questions become a moot point.
Yeah. Do something meaningful, and then directly communicate it to your people. You don't have to play these games to try to get them to engage you and be a part of your community. So we're going to talk more about that this season. We've got lots of fun topics. But bottom line, if you want to lead your people through this thing, which we know you've all been, trying to do in very difficult circumstances, you got to be able to talk to them directly. So you got to be able to reach them directly. Once you can do that, now you got a chance, and you can ask them questions, and you can ask them what their needs are, and you can ask them what their concerns are, and you can start to try to address all of those things while building deeper relationships with them, even whenever you can't meet in person all the time, or there's these other kinds of restrictions in place. So anyway, this is just a fundamental thing I hope every church takes away now from this last year, of just how important it is that we can really reach not just the people who are really engaged, not just the people who are really involved, but especially those people that are not as engaged and not as involved.
Yeah. Well, we hope this resonated with you. And again, last episode, this episode, there's so much more that we've got on the docket for this year. But if this resonated with you, and you know somebody else who may be a little bit on the fence about something like this, and you think they could benefit, please be sure to pass this along. At the very least, be sure to subscribe, leave us a rating and review. But before we go, as always, we've got a question from one of our listeners. So we're going to bounce over to our People Got Church Problems segment. Okay. Today's question is from our friend Bill in Wisconsin. Bill says, "I know this would be unique to each receiver of an email, but what would you suggest as the appropriate amount of content? I think of our bulletin and I think boring." Too much info. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could spend a lot of time on this, but the general answer is emails should be much, much shorter now. People go through a lot of email, and if you build the habit that people can read your email pretty quickly, and so they know that when they get an email from you that it's going to be easy and quick to get through, then they'll end up reading it. If they know it's a long one, then they say, "I'll read that later," and of course later rarely happens because there's a bunch of other emails that pile in on top of it. So the shorter the better. In general, you got to be willing to cut out a lot of the content and point people to other places. You got to say, what's the most important 20% of what I want to say, and cut out the bottom 80%. And you might say, well, we have all these other things we need to announce and say. And the truth is that if nobody's reading it, you're not saying anything to them. And so you can say less and end up communicating a lot more. So you got to get used to saying less, and you'll end up communicating more in that way. Build that habit. But the other thing to realize, another part of this, is to learn to segment your lists. So a lot of the reasons those emails get so long is that you're announcing things in them that are really meant for one particular group within the church. And so, again, build your system. Flocknote does this automatically, helps you do this, where you can build all your different groups. If you have an announcement for just the altar servers or just the men's Bible study group, send it to just that group and make it short and get to the point. You don't need to announce that to everybody. So once you start to segment out the information, you realize there's only a couple of really important things I need to say to the community this week, and here they are.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Bill. I hope that was a helpful answer. It's a broad topic, so I'm sure we'll be tackling something like that again in the future. Well, before we go, we got one last thing, so don't shut this off yet. We're gonna bounce it over to our friend Liz and find out where Uno is today.
Hey everyone! This week Uno was spotted in Pasadena, Maryland at Our Lady of the Chesapeake. Mary sent us this photo, and Mary, you look fabulous in your bright blue Uno t-shirt. All right, We want to hear your questions, so head to our hotline at findinguno.com, click on Ask a Question in the upper right-hand corner, and let us know what your questions are. As always, we would love to hear your name and where you're from, but if you prefer to remain anonymous, that is totally fine with us too. That's all we have for today. We'll see you next time on the Finding Uno Show. Bye-bye.